It has been a long time since I've watched a shonen series, and after finishing Serial Experiments Lain and Neon Genesis Evangelion, I wanted to have some fun, turn off my inner academic, and enjoy the simple pleasure of watching teenagers punch the hell out of each other. And my God, My Hero Academia delivers so hard that I wrote 2 separate analysis videos and started a YouTube channel to talk about it. I'm not good at turning off my inner academic. With the 13-episode first season already aired and the second season just now starting, this is the perfect time to delve into exactly what makes the series tick. In his series recap of spring 2016, Jeff Thu of Mother's Basement said that My Hero Academia was, at its heart, a character study. And that's fair. But it has received some criticism for failing to do anything particularly new or interesting with its characters, which is kinda fair. My Hero Academia's roster of dramatis personae basically goes down the shonen checklist and ticks boxes. Plucky underdog teenage protagonist with a hard-on for justice who's saddled with an unexpected OP superpower that he uses to follow his dreams and fight for his friends? Check. Unnecessarily hostile rival figure with a god complex whose pride, hot-headedness, and budding narcissistic personality disorder would make him a frontrunner for president of the United States. Check. Vague yet menacing league of antagonists who are uncompromisingly evil because evil? Check. Muscle Jesus? Check. Badass fights? Check, check. Cute girl whose personality boils down to cute girl? Check. Although that's quickly changing with the second season. So yes, My Hero Academia's characters are simple, but this isn't a bad thing. In fact, I would argue that keeping things simple and approachable, at least for now, helps My Hero Academia effectively set up what is sure to be a long-running and complex narrative. To start, let's talk about what the first season of My Hero Academia is trying to do and how its simplicity helps it reach that goal. Unlike something like Psycho Pass, which uses its first season to tell a complete, self-contained story, My Hero Academia's first season serves as an introduction to a huge shonen narrative. My Hero Academia is a long-running manga series with nearly 120 chapters already released, so the source material clearly has a lot going on in terms of plot. On top of that, it has a ridiculous cast of characters featuring over 15 unique character designs just among Deku's classmates, not counting teachers, villains, and other heroes. With a series this big, trying to delve into the nuances of its plot and characters right out of the gate runs a huge risk of overwhelming the viewer with information, especially considering we only have 13 episodes to work with. So Season 1 has to find the core appeal of the series and focus as much as it can on getting that appeal across to the audience while still getting them invested in characters who are going to be important in the future. And it does this masterfully. The appeal of a long-running shonen series like MHA, besides the obvious visceral appeal of hype action scenes, is in seeing the protagonists grow and change over time to be able to tackle new and more dangerous obstacles. In short, if we don't care about Deku, then we don't care about My Hero Academia. As such, it's important both that the viewer be invested in Deku from the beginning and that they see that he has room to grow. They start achieving these goals in the very first scene of the show, where a young Deku protects some Randy from a young Bakugo's bullying, getting his ass kicked in the process. Deku acting as a protector despite being clearly outmatched sets him up as being a plucky underdog with fighting spirit, while his crushing defeat gets the audience hyped to see him give Bakugo the ass thrashing he deserves. This kind of storytelling is what we see all through the first season. Everything, besides surface-level introductions of minor characters, relates directly to Deku. All we know about Ochako by the end of the first season is that she floats things, she vomits rainbows, she's adorable, and she supports Deku. Bakugo hates Deku because Deku threatens his perceived superiority, and everything he does is an obstacle on Deku's path to becoming a hero. Even All Might, the most rounded character in the series, is rounded in ways that relate to Deku. He believes in Deku, which makes the viewer feel that Deku is worth believing in. The fact that All Might is getting weaker sets up a parallel for Deku getting stronger and eventually taking his place as the symbol of peace. And seeing All Might fight gets the viewer pumped because it gives us an idea of what Deku will eventually be able to do with One for All. All Might even acts as Deku's first major stumbling block. He can handle Bakugo and his classmates making fun of him for being a quirkless wannabe, but it's not until he hears All Might say it that he finally accepts that he can't be a hero, which makes it all the sweeter when Deku finally proves himself and All Might takes him on as his apprentice. The series even forgoes telling us the motives of the main villains in favor of its goal of getting us to support Deku. What does that character design. What does Shigaraki want? He wants to kill All Might. Why? Doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters is that killing All Might is a direct threat to Deku, since All Might, in addition to being his friend and mentor, is the only person Deku knows who can teach him how to use One for All. Killing All Might isn't just the thing that villains do, it kills Deku's chances of being a real superhero. Everything comes back to Deku. And this doesn't mean that the other characters in the series are bad or uninteresting, far from it. In fact, I would argue that taking the time to round out Deku's classmates right now is unnecessary and would only detract from the series as a whole. Take Sound Euphonium as a counterpoint. Using the same amount of episodes as My Hero Academia's first season, Sound Euphonium manages to craft some of the most nuanced and multifaceted characters in modern anime. The difference here is that Sound Euphonium has to. Unless you care about marching band music, the only draw of Sound Euphonium is going to be seeing these characters grow and interact with each other, so there has to be a lot to interact with. This isn't the case for My Hero Academia. Just by virtue of being superheroes, the supporting characters have enough going on that I find myself rooting for them despite not knowing half their names. Todoroki is badass. This guy is a bird, and Ochako is a sentient Hello Kitty sticker on a backpack full of sunshine, and I love her. When I look at a character in Sound Euphonium, I see a high school student. When I look at a character in My Hero Academia, I see a high school student, but this one has USB cords coming out of her ears, and that alone is enough to get me interested in her character for 13 episodes without having to go into detail about her superhero backstory. In other words, My Hero Academia takes full advantage of its setting to create character designs that are interesting enough to hold a viewer's attention for a season without having to take time away from Deku to develop those characters in depth. And this simplicity might even be a boon when it comes to creating poignant character moments going forward. Take Bakugo, for example. Bakugo is unlikable. That's not to say that he's unsympathetic, or that we can't like his character. I get that he has a superiority complex, and that he's always been told that he's the best, and I'm writing a video about it. We can understand why he is the way that he is in a very surface level way, but we can't like him. And the story goes out of its way to make sure we can't like him. The first we see of Bakugo, he's using his deadly quirk to pick on a presumably defenseless kid and an actually defenseless Deku. Later that same episode, he literally tells Deku to kill himself, and he only becomes more of an asshole as the series goes on. If this keeps up, I would be willing to call it a mistake, but I think it's safe to say that this is a brilliant setup for character development down the line. If anything happens to make him more sympathetic, which I assume it will, the fact that that sympathy has to compete with a whole season of unnecessary aggression to affect our assessment of Bakugo will make it all the more compelling when the time comes. In addition to that, if we were given a tragic backstory and a heroic motivation for why he wants to be the best right from the start, then we would have to question who we want to root for when he and Deku square off. For now, we need to want to see Deku kick his ass to make sure we're invested in Deku's character. And remembering how fiercely we cheered for Deku in the training exercise is only going to intensify future fights between them once we have reason to cheer for Bakugo as well. As another point of comparison, let's take a look at another popular series with a large supporting cast, Yuri on Ice. Yuri on Ice shares a lot of similarities with My Hero Academia. It follows a protagonist as he develops a relationship with his idol while pursuing a professional career doing something he loves and fighting against an unnecessarily hostile rival. The difference here is that Yuri on Ice gives its massive supporting cast full-length backstories and motivations from the moment they're introduced. On the surface, this may seem like a point for Yuri, but what this winds up doing is killing the pacing of the series and detracting from the development of its main characters. Regardless of whether you think the emotional crux of the story lies in Yuri's relationship with Victor, or his rivalry with Yurio, or his pro figure skating career, taking 5 minutes in the middle of a 20-minute episode to talk about this guy's relationship problems twice does nothing but distract from that. The characters in the first season of My Hero Academia, with the possible exception of All Might, can all be described in 2 words or less. Overzealous dork, bubbly cheerleader, asshole. Choosing to distill its characters like this allows the series to focus its attention on getting us to root for its protagonist and establishing a tone for the series. While Yuri on Ice doesn't outright fail at doing either of those things, it does have some serious identity issues that could have been solved by spending more time focusing on Yuri and Victor and less time watching Chris come on the ice. Again, in Yuri, every participant in every ice skating competition gets a full-length routine on screen, despite the fact that we are never going to see most of them again. By contrast, look at the training game in My Hero Academia. While we get clips from each of the fights showing off Deku's classmates' impressive powers, the only fight we get to see in full is that between Deku and Bakugo. This keeps us interested in the supporting cast while making sure we remember that the emotional center of the story is Deku's quest to be the world's greatest hero. One last thing to note before the end of this video is that this is not the way things are going to be for the rest of the series. Already in episode 1 of the second season, we have gotten background information about All Might, a brief indication of Ochako's competitive streak, as well as the motivations and backstories for both of the series' main deuteragonists. The second episode gives us a hint of what's going on with Todoroki, and I'm willing to bet that this trend is only going to continue. MHA's first season didn't present its characters in the simplistic way that it did because they have no depth, but rather because it wanted to underplay that depth to make sure that it didn't fall into the same pitfalls as Yuri on Rice. Now, could it have done more to realize and round out its characters than it did while still making sure that the core appeal of its series wasn't diluted? Sure, the show's approach isn't perfect, and it does still have some minor pacing issues, but overall I think that this choice was a good one. It gives us enough characterization to work with and get invested in without bogging us down with full backstories for 15+ characters, and the lack of information makes us want to keep watching in hopes of learning more about our favorite background characters. In short, the simplicity was intentional, it's temporary, and it works. And that about wraps it up for this video. Like I said, this channel is just starting out, so please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed it. It would really help me out. If you were particularly fond of it, feel free to subscribe and get quality content delivered straight to your subscription box as soon as it hits the web. Until next time, this has been Explanation Point, trying to think of a good sign-off. It'll come to me.